This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Now, would you stand up with me? And I just want to, this is not going to be an exercise class, but I just want you to just do whatever feels comfortable to you to kind of stretch, just move around a little bit. We might do this one more time in here, but just kind of get yourselves loosened up a little bit. And, these are the kinds of things I think we need to do when we get ready to practice. This is really, you can have a seat. This is fine. I've thought a lot about through the years, what can we do to make ourselves more aware of, how we're using our bodies. I can remember as a student being told, if I was doing something, maybe, raising my shoulders or doing something that was interfering with good natural playing, then I need to think about it. Now, if you study piano, you may have had teachers, and piano teachers will debate about technique until the end of time, but, I know one teacher who actually has a student sort of play like this, but I always used to think, well, now why are they doing that? It just seems to defeat the purpose. And I've been influenced by a woman in North Carolina, Barbara Listerson, who has a method called the Listerson method, and I refer to her, and there are a couple of quotes in the handout, and she talks about basically just a very natural way of playing. She says, well, the roots are really in the old Russian technique of piano playing, but essentially it's about what is the most natural, what is the most efficient way of playing either the piano or the organ. She's a pianist, so everything is directed towards the piano, but, to me, these are all keyboard instruments. I just am of the mind that there isn't that much difference. Sure, there are obvious differences. You can add a harpsichord, a clavichord, fortepiano, all those things to it, but there are certain things that connect. They're all keyboard instruments. So, our basic approach to the keyboard is essentially the same. We're going to have issues with touch, legato, articulation, all these kinds of things that are different. But they're all keyboard instruments. So, one thing that Barbara Listerson talks about is, I call this healthy techniques. And she says, yes, it's healthy, but she even prefers healthful. That we think that these are healthful techniques. I also am basing a lot of my philosophy on the Alexander technique. Has anybody experienced that at all? Yes, okay. Then, and by no means am I an expert in it. I just have been influenced by it. Essentially, the Alexander technique, Alexander was an actor, and his approach is all about good body awareness and not doing anything that would sort of impede one's ability, as for him to act well, not to have excessive tension. And it could be, in the face, and anywhere like that. And for us as players, what are we doing that somehow impedes the flow for good playing? There might be a very difficult passage in something where we're tightening up, our wrists are getting tight, or our shoulders are raising, or our neck is getting tight. Where if we didn't do all of that, we could somehow release all of that tension, we might be able to do it. We probably would be able to do it with much greater ease. So that's sort of the goal here. What can we do to make our gestures, our movements more efficient? And another thing, if we just think about goals, another thing is that we want to, be aware. That's the thing. I think a lot of times I'll work with students and really sense from the beginning, well, they're just not aware. They're not thinking about it. So we need to really constantly monitor what we're doing as we play. Are we getting tight? Singers think about this a lot. Are they getting tight? Are we getting tight in the wrist maybe, or in arms? Are we raising? This is a common thing, to raise the shoulders a little bit. And if you can imagine, if you're in this position for a long time, I mean, for me, I'm doing this, I'm holding it, and even just a few seconds, that's starting to hurt. So, but really, when we're playing, a lot of people do this, and even just a little bit, I think about pianists who will do that. And I think a lot of musicians just, in the attempt to be expressive, they overdo the physical gestures. You see pianists doing that, and all kinds of moving all over the place, and the string players do this, and others. And really, has anybody ever seen videos of the great pianist Rubinstein? If you haven't, go in and look at that. I mean, he was called, and this was in a very positive sense, the mannequin at the piano. I mean, someone who he could do anything, was one of the greatest pianists ever, and had this wonderful technique and very expressive player, very musical, and yet he wasn't moving all over the place. He had very free, fluid technique, and it seems to me we can learn a lot from that. And another goal for us is we want to be able to maintain a sense of, be it on the piano or the organ, a good sense of balance. How are we balancing, aligning ourselves? Going back to the Alexander technique, one of the tenets of that is that as you stand, and this for us, I often think about this, and I'll tell students this: as you sit on the bench, imagine that you're like a marionette. You have a string coming out of the top of your head that's holding you up, because you want to have this sense that the head is being just simply lightly suspended there on top of the neck and the shoulders and the spine. And because the neck, this area, this is where a lot of people will get tense too. So if you can think about that, it's sometimes it's just a matter of imagery, thinking of something very relaxed and light. Now, I will say this, that I've mentioned that word relaxed just to say, it's not just about being relaxed. I mean, of course, if we were completely relaxed, we would just fall over and onto the floor, so you have to have a certain amount of tension, shall we say, in a good way, just to maintain balance and to play. But it's all about the release of that tension. Music, isn't music a lot about that? Tension and release. I mean, you think about, any dissonance, and then there's the release. There's the tension and the release. So, beyond all this, we want to be aware. How can we improve our playing by being aware of just any unnecessary tension in our body? It can be, as I say, it can be the neck, it can be in the back, it could be the upper back, it could be the lower back. A lot of times people say, oh, I've been practicing my lower back, or the shoulders, or the arms, or whatever. So we just want to be aware of where this is. It could also be, I'm going to get to a few of these things in a minute, but it can be the legs. For organists, what are we doing with our legs? What is our pedal technique like? And I'll get to this, but there are certain techniques that promote a certain type of pedaling with, knees touching and all this kind of stuff. So what are we doing? Part of awareness is this great sense of balance, and and just constantly monitoring yourself. And listen. I mean, I have to constantly think about that. I don't think it's. I mean, through time, one can just sort of feel that it's more natural, but it's also very, very easy for us to fall into this sort of trap of getting tense, because there's the pressure. Oh gosh, I've just been given this piece. I've got to play it in 2 days. To accompany in big huge anthem at the company, or I programmed the Beatles toccata. And I forgot to practice it. And oh my gosh, mean, whatever it may be. This is when people get injured. And this is really what this is all about, I think, is that what can you do to prevent injury? That's the Barbarossa thing. Her whole method really is, and she has a DVD, by the way, and you can find all this on the internet, lots of clips of this, but, you know, she talks about injury preventive technique. I mean, it's all about how can we be proactive, essentially.
Say her name again.
Barbara Lister Sink. And you know, I'll tell you what, for the handout, I'll talk to them. We'll either have copies made.
They're coming.
Yeah, oh, they're coming? Oh, okay, all right. Anyway, so we want to have a great sense of balance. We want to think of balancing the head gently right on top of the spine. As I mentioned a minute ago, the image of the marionette, I love that. You want to think of balancing your torso, right? Because right on the sitting bones, as we sit on the bench, I mean, this is an issue for us. Think of the hard surface that we have to sit on here. Barbara Listerstick actually also promotes using some sort of very thin little cushion or something that will provide, you know, a little bit of help here. I mean, some of us have, you know, have enough cushioning, actual cushioning if you have it, but you know, some people don't. I mean, I've had students who just, they need something, but this can be an issue. But you know, when it comes to the actual practice session, however, you know, long that may be, you need to think about breaks. You know, this is something that I tell students all the time. Don't just sit there for, you know, 2 hours straight or something. I mean, you've got to get up. You really ought to get up, maybe even in between pieces. You know, every 15 minutes or something. But certainly, if you have a block of time, let's say maybe you do have 2 hours of practice. I mean, and that's a luxury for a lot of us. But if you have that, there needs to be, you need to have at least 1 or 2 breaks within that period. Those breaks are important for us physically, but also mentally. You know, we need that break. You know, I often tell students that you need to plan your practice session in the way that you would plan a choir rehearsal. You know, and we'll get to some of that in a minute. Now, your legs. As you sit on the bench, you need to think about not allowing excess tension to build up in your legs. You know, release your legs and really think about just releasing the tension from the hips. You know, for the arms, you really want to think about playing from the whole arm. And so that the energy is really coming from here and going out all the way down the arm, rather than playing, let's say, from the wrist or from the elbow. Because if you don't want excessive tension building up in here or in here, you want to think of the whole arm. And, you know, actually, why don't you stand up one more time? I'm going to get you up a couple more times. But do this. If you let your arms just hang very gently and loosely, and then just take your right arm and just bring it up like that and let it hang about halfway. See, this gives you an idea of hand position on the keyboard. That's important. You can have seats. Liszt refers to this as the dead hand. He calls it the dead hand. I mean, that loose hand. And la main morte, he called it. And, you know, you think about it, especially for moving this way, having that supple wrist enables somebody to really do a lot pretty easily. You can't, if you have this kind, and I have had students who have this kind of come into me playing like that. It's a claw, I call it the claw, you know, I mean, and you can just see all of this tension in the fingers, in the hand, in the wrist, whatever. If you can begin to work on it, it doesn't happen overnight, but if you have a student, you know, who has that kind of issue, it's just something that I think you have to slowly work through. And we're going to, in a minute, talk about some things I do just for basic warm-up. Now, I want to talk about, I have a heading here, habits which may lead to fatigue, pain, and injury. And this is something, I've already mentioned a few of these things. Let me just mention a few more. I've already said, this raising of the shoulders. We want to avoid that. Holding the other arms. I mentioned a minute ago, a pianist I used to call it that, it's like we're flying, the wings are going, and I know pianists who play like this, but I think there's they're getting tied in here, there's all this unnecessary tension. If you're thinking more this way, it feels so much better, the head. What are we doing with our head? Are we doing this? It's this kind of thing. It looks like a chicken doing it, the head jutting out. Listen, I've been guilty of that sometimes. Look, they can't see the music maybe. It depends where how far the music rack is. But, this is an impediment for us. The console, and sometimes we just have to adjust. But be aware of that. Is your head, are you doing this or this, and holding it like that for a long period of time? That can cause tension. I've mentioned the wrist, but this continuous tightening of the wrist and the hand. Remember what I said a minute ago, you're going to have tension, but it's about the release. You've got to figure out ways to release the tension. That's very important. Another thing is, and this is something I have seen actually incredible professional pianists do this, but it goes against the natural law of playing. But that is this hyper extension of the fingers and wrist, playing basically like that. Maybe you've seen people type on a computer, a keyboard like that, and this can be the cause of a lot of carpal tunnel syndrome and things like that. But playing the piano like that, the wrist way down, very unhealthy way of playing. And I just, some people somehow get away with these things, and I don't know how they get away with it. But think about this. It just looks so much better if you're. Now I've got to sit down, but basically, if you're like this, you're thinking straight across with a supple wrist here and the hand hanging lightly, gently like that. Not this, not getting tight like that, and not doing that. That just is unnatural. The same thing would be, lifting the fingers up high. Sometimes maybe you'll have a student who's, a little bit maybe, but I've seen people who play and the fingers are just way up in the air. Most people would know. If you're playing the piano, you learn as a student, a young student, you keep your hands on the keyboard, but people forget about it. Keep your hands on the surface of the keys. I say that a lot. I hear myself saying it now, and I realize I say that all the time. Keep your hands on the surface of the keys. Actually, that's just good technique because you're going to play more accurately that way. Your fingers are on the surface of the keys. Then there's, if you go way up in the air, you have a likelihood that you're going to fall back down on the wrong notes. So don't let that happen. Here, by the way, is one difference between the piano technique and organ technique. There are plenty of times with the piano when we need to be up in the air, we need to fall. We need to have that free fall for dynamics. We want a big sound, so we need that. On the organ, we don't need that. So there's another reason why on the organ, we need to just stay on the surface of the keys. That's not to say that we wouldn't have articulation and those sorts of things, but all of those gestures are really fairly subtle. All right, so this is all about these habits that may lead to any kind of injury or pain have to do with just all of this unnecessary accumulation of muscle tension. But it happens because that the tension builds up, but then we don't release it. So keep thinking yes, there's going to be tension, but how can I release it? It's all about releasing. Another thing, this may seem obvious, but it's the slumping torso, sitting in doing that while we're playing. I mean, I'm not saying you have to sit like a soldier and be, that's tight too, but be aware of that, that you're not slumping, that you're not doing this, and it really does make a difference. All right. So, just to repeat, this accumulation of muscle tension really could lead to some sort of physical discomfort. I mean, I'm not saying it's necessarily going to lead to injury, but it's just something that we need to be aware of. I mean, people get injured, but I'll tell you, I probably know, throughout my life, I've known more pianists who have been injured than organists, but I've known organists who've been injured too, and I know one organist in particular who was injured, and he was so severely injured that he really just could not play. It was painful to play. He just couldn't do it. And he worked with Barbara Listersley, and she rebuilt his technique, and he could play. I mean, it took about 2 years. I mean, somebody who's that severely injured with, it's a combination of the carpal tunnel syndrome and other things. I don't think he had focal dystonia or anything like that, but at any rate, she started him from the ground up, and then, worked for a couple of years. And sometimes that happens. I think for most of us, there may be some discomfort, but we're going to play better, ultimately, if we can just be aware of these things. It's all about that. Releasing shoulder muscles, letting our hand hang, as I said a minute ago, letting it hang lightly like that, keeping the wrist free, not building up tension here. And another thing is how we can avoid tension in the legs. Now, some of the challenges for us will be, we want to just think about what is a challenge? What is going to be something that we encounter with the console? What will make it difficult for us to have a good sense of balance? Well, right off from the beginning, it's the bench. I think that a lot of times, sitting at the piano, for example, that's unfortunately not the kind of bench that you want. You need an adjustable bench. Now, for me, I'm looking at this. This bench is maybe okay for me. For some people, though, it might be too high. Or it might be too low. I think being too low is even worse. But you want to be able to have a sense of that this can be straight across, and that you have enough room, that you're high enough so that your wrist can sort of hang like this just lightly. The problem is that if the bench height is not good, then your wrist may end up being too low. So that's something we want to think about. Now, for the organ, it becomes a challenge. This is great to have an adjustable bench. More and more organs these days have adjustable benches. Sometimes, if you don't, then maybe you have blocks for the bench. But if you need them, then you just need to use them. But that's important. Not having the right bench height makes a difference. I'm on the second page, at the bottom of the second page of that handout. I already mentioned something about, the cushion support. I mean, it's great, there's wonderful piano benches that are cushioned and adjustable. Those are the best kind, For the organ, though, we have to be careful because you can't have a cushioned bench or you won't be able to pivot and even slide a little as necessary. So, I think that becomes an issue for us. But the music rack, this is pretty good for me, but for some people it might be a little high, or especially if you have a fourth manual and the rack is up high, then you're doing this, too much. And so you just need to be aware of it. Again, awareness, body awareness. What are we doing, and what can we do to deal with this? I mean, I'm not, it may not be a perfect solution, whatever you do, but you have to figure out a way to at least reduce the amount of tension that might be occurring. Your eyesight, glasses, if you wear glasses or contacts or whatever, something there that could make the situation difficult? You know, what can you do to improve that? Lighting. Yeah, I mean, to me, lighting for me, I must say, if I don't, I mean, you know, if you have something memorized, fine, you know. But I must say, actually, speaking of that, I have a student who's blind, and he's phenomenal, and it's amazing the way he learns, and he has an incredible ear and all this. And I often think, I tell students, you know, you should practice sometime, you know, with the lights off or with your eyes closed, and just to see, and you realize that you know the keyboard much better than you realize. You know, I think that a lot of times we end up thinking, oh, we need to look. You know, when you first learn playing the organ, you learn, well, you shouldn't look down at the pedals ultimately. You should just look ahead and not look so much down. But I think it's very natural for somebody to look and sort of be sure that, because of course with the organ we play so many different types of instruments, and we have flat pedal boards and agio pedal boards and all these things that we have to adjust to. But you know, really, if you close your eyes, you realize you know it better than you realize. You know, and much better than you thought. And you can begin to let go, I think, of some of the tension by doing that. The last thing on that list is the action. Well, you know, sometimes there may not be anything we can do about it, but we have to adjust. You know, for the piano, it could be the piano has an incredibly light action or a very heavy action. Okay, well, we have to be able to adjust to that. For the organ, it's the same thing. I mean, is it electric action, electropneumatic action? Is it tracker action? You know, if it's mechanical action, what is it like when we couple the manuals? If it's particularly heavy, some people like it because it may be closer to the feel of the piano, but it just depends. But we need to be prepared for that. And if it's particularly heavy, and you need to practice with manuals coupled on a tracker, you need to work up to that. You know, I'm going to get into this in a minute, and just these suggestions for warm-ups. Here at the top of this, this third page, is some information quoted from Barbara Listerson, and she's talking about the connection between a well-coordinated technique and art history. And I love this quote from her: "Healthful technique does not create musicality. Rather, it allows the player to listen better and to be free of distracting physical impediments that block access to musicality." So basically, the point is that, you know, once you have a sense of freedom in your technique, of this fluidity in your technique, you then can play much more musically. I think her whole point is that. And this is particularly for pianists, but it's true for all of us, that you don't have to make all of these wild gestures to be musical or to be expressive. You know, there's nothing wrong with I'm not saying we should be stiff or that we should never move, but we don't need to do all of this. And you see that. That's very common. It's very common in violence, you know, and going on that. And then people think, because it's the visual, people think they're watching, they say, oh, wasn't that the most musical playing in the world? When in fact, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was, but if you're just listening, if you close your eyes and you really listen, what are you hearing? You know, I think that's something that we don't do enough of today, is just listen. You know, I'm one of these people, I'm not bad about it, but I do not like background music. Because I like to listen. I like to really listen to music. If I hear music, I'm going to listen to it. Very hard. It's even hard for me to have music going when I'm driving. Because if it's, I mean, particularly if it's something dramatic, like Wagner, I mean, you know, so I have to be very careful. You know, it has to be the right kind of music that's not going to get me too wound up. But think about that, you know. Maybe close your eyes more. You know, and try to get away. We live in such a visual world that it's all about, you know, what do I see? You know, and you know, everybody, there's screens all over the place, and then there's sound everywhere, and music, you know, and isn't silence great? You know, think about that. I mean, time for prayer, meditation, just plain old simple quiet. You know, that can be good too. Here she gives you a list of, she has technical musical benefits of the helpful technique. And I've already mentioned several. In number one, a lot of it is particularly applicable to the piano, but I personally believe that organists need to be able to play the piano because most of us play the piano in choir rehearsal, if not for a lot of other things. But, and I tell students, you can't not go into a choir rehearsal playing the piano sounding like an organist. I hate it when people say, playing the piano sounds like an organist playing the piano. Play the piano the way the piano should be played, which means that you need to be able to voice and color and do all these kinds of things that make the instrument sound at its best. Then the next thing, physical, mental, psychological benefits. And I've touched on a lot of this. I think these are all things that are pretty obvious in some ways. We've talked about a lot of that. I like this idea of D there, that this promotes a greater focus and concentration, and that's true. It does sort of clear your mind in a way. And the last thing, it really helps your ability to listen, to really listen. So again, awareness, keep thinking that, body awareness. It's amazing to me how many people they just never think about it. Never think about the fact that they may be doing this or what every time they play. And listen, I'm not saying that we can all get in situations where we just may do it, we may get tense for whatever reason. But if you're just aware, then you can say, oh my gosh, I realize that, and I stop. What's very helpful in practice is having a mirror. Now in small practice rooms, it can be more practical in a church setting, not so practical maybe, but I was just thinking here, I was sitting down warming up on the piano. This is nice because of just the shadows. I can at least see my hands, but you can even see yourself in the piano here. Some way that you can observe yourself. Maybe it's even videotaping yourself, but just some way to observe what you're doing. It makes all the difference in the world. Recording ourselves is always important, and really listening is that when you realize, oh my goodness, I was playing like that. I'm playing that fast or that slowly or, whatever. That didn't work. That's really important for organism. Okay, the next little section, I have some suggestions for warm-ups, and I think I'm going to sit at the piano to do this. If I have a piano, I like to warm up at the piano, but it can work at the organ too if you don't have an organ. Plenty of times when I sit down and I'm going to practice the organ, there's no piano around, I just do this at the organ. But I firmly believe that we all need some kind of warm-up. Even if it's only about 5 minutes. Let's say you're going to have an hour to practice, just some kind of warm-up. It doesn't have to be a lot. I'm giving you a lot of things that maybe would take 15 or 20 minutes if you really did all of it. But, you could just have a little bit of warm-up for about 5 minutes. And then begin to practice with something that isn't particularly taxing. I think that's important. Back again to the idea what I said earlier, I suggest people think of their practice sessions and organize their practice session in a similar way as you would for a choir rehearsal. You would never have the choir start with the most difficult piece. I'm not saying you wouldn't save the most difficult piece for last when they're tired, but yet you wouldn't necessarily just start with the most difficult thing. You really think about an order that works for the voice naturally. Let's warm up the voice, and that's the other thing is that singers always warm up, right? Men don't just start singing. They should warm up, and then the rehearsal itself is a continuation of that. Now, for us, we earlier. We stood up and we stretched. You want to do that one more time, just to make sure yourselves loosened up. But I like to say, you're rolling your shoulders, your arms, you're stretching like this, yes, and you're doing this. This can be very helpful if you either at the beginning or maybe in the middle. You've practiced for 30 or 45 minutes doing this kind of thing. Just stretching the back a little can be very helpful as well. So, and I like this kind of thing for choirs too, to have this kind of physical movement, before singing. I think many people do that. So, all right, have a seat. So we're preparing ourselves both physically and mentally. I mean, just, you might just take a moment. You close your eyes, you breathe, take a few breaths, and just try to clear your mind. I think even if we just take 10 seconds to do it, it makes a difference. Rather than, I think so many of us get, our lives can be so busy, running. Okay, you've got 30 minutes to practice, or, whatever. I've got to run, sit down, play. But 10 seconds, it doesn't take that long. But just that little bit of space and silence helps. I must say, I like silence in worship. Now, I'm not a Quaker, so I'm not saying 20 minutes, but that's fine. When I was a student, I played for a Quaker meeting house at one time, and they had something called the communion after the manner of friends, and that's the period when they would sit in silence, and then eventually someone would stand up and talk about something. But I found that to be a very spiritual time. I mean, silence is something that is so incredibly powerful for us, and in a way so revealing and so healthy. We just need that. And in our world, when there is so much noise, it's just great to have that moment. And even if it is just 10 seconds, just to breathe and to sort of prepare ourselves, and then we go. All right. So I mentioned the stretching. Now, when it's time to play, it's not going to be long. Hopefully your bench is where you want it to be. The height is good, and all of that. I am a proponent of finger, exercises, playing scales, that kind of thing. But I think we have to warm up to that. Something I do is a 5-note figuration. So, and I'll show you what that is. But in the Lister method, she teaches people from when she's retraining people, just starting with, first of all, she talks about a one-note stroke, and then 2 notes, and then 3 notes, and so on. And she sort of builds from there. And ultimately, that kind of thing can be very helpful for practicing. If you have a difficult passage, to divide that passage up into small units can be very helpful. All right, so one thing I like to start out with is, and I've got this written there on the page, playing scale reads 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 with the right hand, and then the opposite, just moving contrary motion with the left. And then I like to just go down. The other thing is, you'll notice I like to stop, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to make sure that I'm free, that my arms are free, that I'm loose, and I'm ready to go. Sometimes I'll stop. Just being organist or pianist, maybe you teach organ and piano, and you know all of these things. So, use them. The main thing is when we're playing exercises like that, we don't want to allow tension to build up. So, That's why I say stop. Like this is a Hanon exercise where you go up a third and then up the scale. And you know, if it's played exactly as written, it's. But sometimes it can be helpful to stop on the first note and just make sure that you're not tight. If you're ever questioning it, you know, you can feel here at the shoulder to see if there is a lot of excess tension for yourself, or have somebody do it for you as you play. What I often do is do several where as I warm up, I'm stopping, but ultimately I'll start getting straighter and maybe a little bit faster, going all the way up the scale, and then coming down. And then at this point, I'm about ready to play some scales. Sometimes I didn't put it necessarily in here. I say after these 5-note scales, you know, begin with some full octave scales. Another thing I do is sometimes I'll play a chord with one hand and a scale with one hand. This might be a way to warm up, particularly in the organ. There are a lot of early toccatas, say, of composers like Sphalen, that have this kind of technique. Well, you know, it feels better on the organ to do that, but and then, you know, it might be the opposite. That kind of thing. I particularly like that for the left hand. So then I'm ready for scales, and you know, you can launch right into scales. You know, major, minor, whatever you're doing, maybe something related to what you're going to practice. And I might be able to say, if I'm going to do A harmonic minor, again, I might hold like that, maybe just do an octave, and then start adding octaves. You'll notice in there I do something that this is very common in the piano world, to start playing scales, you know, one value, a slow value, if you're thinking it could be whole notes, it could be half notes, and then you gradually build and increase and get faster. So from whole to half to quarter and so on, just moving all the way up to 16ths, you know. So that's one way of doing it. I don't necessarily do it like that all the time. Usually what I would do is, again, just and sometimes what I will do, this is particularly true of the organ because you run out of keys, is to play something like, and then going up the octave and then back down to the fifth. That kind of thing. I say that I'll throw in maybe some improvisation. That may be just a little chord progression or something, just something just to break up the monotony of it, you know. And it can be helpful for yourself just to practice a few things, a little chord progression, or something maybe you're going to need to play interludes between stanzas of hymns, or you know, it can be something incorporated just in general to improvisation. So I'll go through that. One thing I mentioned in one of the headings is play evenly first, then try dotted rhythms. I'm a big proponent in using dotted rhythms. Let's say if you have a passage of 16ths, continuous 16ths, whatever that may be. Well, I'll take the B or toccata. It's, I might play like that. That kind of thing. Another way to approach that, speaking of that piece, is to think, just as I was with the scales, hold the top note. It's perpetual motion, so these fast values never stop. So they're going to switch in the D major section to the left hand, but it's continuous. So as you practice it, think about taking it in small groups like that. So where you're going, you're just playing, holding the top note. There are a lot of things in a piece like that could cause tension. And one is, first of all, the fact that it's continuous for 5 minutes, the perpetual motion. The other is articulation. You don't often hear that Vigor has articulation written in so that it's slurred at the top and then articulated. So don't let that cause tension, that worry. That articulation can be very subtle. It doesn't have to be so detached that causes tension. So be aware of that. Another thing about that piece is that I think that, and it's true of a lot of things, let your left hand sort of control what's going on. Because if you look at the score, it's written in accents. It's not just, but it's, and then, so you have all of these accents, and if you kind of let the left hand control things, in my experience, the right hand gets less tired and just is more fluid. The left hand is almost as if the left hand is the conductor, of what's going on. And that really helps with the rhythm. Another thing about that piece, by the way, I didn't plan on talking about Vigor Toccata, but it is actually a good thing to mention because a lot of people say, gosh, how do I play that? It does not need to be so fast. Even Vigor, you may be aware that Vigor revised his symphony something like 4 times. This is Toccata is the last movement from the 5th symphony. And the original metronome marking was quarter note equals 108. And he revised it to be 100. It doesn't seem like a lot, but there's enough of a difference that it gets down to being about like, he said, I am so sick and tired of hearing people play my toccata so fast. He hated it. And, personally, I think that when it's more like this tempo, quarter note equals 100, it is more, what's a better tempo? It's more dignified. It's more majestic. It isn't the French can-can. I mean, you hear the, and usually when people play it so fast, the accents in the left hand cannot be heard. And the rhythm isn't strong. It's erratic. And I don't think it's that kind of piece. There are other pieces to show how fast you can play and all that. So don't do that with that piece. All right, so I've got listed here a few other things. I've already mentioned using technical exercises from Hannon and Czerny, playing hymns and service music as part of the practice, using challenging sections. I will do that. Maybe the Vigor Toccata. I strongly encourage you to do this. As part of your warm-up, use sections, maybe some of the most difficult sections of pieces that you will play regularly. Maybe you play the Vigor Toccata every Easter or some other Sunday, but once a year, or something else. But I will often use sections of pieces like that just to kind of keep it in my fingers, because I know this is something that I want to play a lot, and if I've just been doing a little bit of even just a few measures of that piece almost every day, then when it comes time and I know, well, I'm playing it in 2 months, okay, then I start to really seriously practice it, it makes all the difference in the world. It really does. You know, when people get injured, I said this early on, but it's because they learn something or practice something and they don't have enough time. And I've tried to warn this one student about this. She didn't get injured, thank goodness, but this student had a church job where she had a lot of demands as an accompanist, and she would just wait too long to start practicing these accompaniments, and some of them were really difficult. And I would say, you just can't do this. You have to start. You may need to start a month or 2 months or more, ahead of time to be ready, because there are some of our accompaniments could be as difficult or even more difficult sometimes than some of the solo literature. I know I've played a few times the Requiem of Duruflé. The Duruflé Requiem, there are parts of it that are harder than some of the solo works of Duruflé. And, as an accompanist, it has to be right. And you can't slow down when it isn't supposed to slow down, the conductor expects you to be there. And I'll tell you, that's really something important. So when we're in situations when we have to learn something really quickly, I know a very fine pianist who accompanied her whole life is as a collaborative pianist. I mean, she's accompanying particularly instrumentalists, but singers too, but most of the instrumental repertoire, for strings and chamber music and all that tends to be much more demanding than what we on average would play in the vocal world. Now, there's plenty of art songs that are difficult. There's plenty of Wolf and Mahler and so forth songs that are really hard to play. But as a general rule, when you're playing all this chamber music of Beethoven and Brahms and Schumann and so on and so forth, it's taxing, not to mention all the modern stuff. And she's literally just playing stuff all the time. And she got injured because she was practicing all the time. And I personally think she was building up all this tension. She was playing like this, and she wasn't releasing. And you've got to remember that part. The releasing, the release of the tension is really the most important part. Because if we don't release the tension, then we're stuck in. And over time, it could possibly lead to some sort of injury. So that's where we've got to really be aware of that. All right, so the rest of this I've said, number 10, this is just my own thought. You need 5 to 20 minutes. I mean, sometimes I literally will go for 20 minutes. That's a little maybe on the long side. That's if I really have the luxury of, I know I have more time to practice. But at least 5 or 10 minutes. I know a choral conductor who, he is also a singer, and he's been a voice teacher. So when you sing in his choir, people love it. Some people love it, some people don't like it because the warm-ups might be 20 minutes or 25 minutes. I've sang in rehearsals, I'm like, oh my gosh, half of the rehearsal is just vocal pieces and stuff. But you really learn how to sing, but then it's like, oh my gosh, we have to practice the Duruflé Requiem. We gotta get to it, folks, in our church settings, now he conducts choirs in school settings, university settings, where he may be rehearsing every day. In our church settings, we don't have the luxury. So I think our church choir members would revolt if we were spending half the time warming up, probably. As I say here, number 11. Just make sure the first piece you practice isn't the most difficult. If you're going to be working with a viewer color, don't start with that. You could do what I did as part of the warm-up, maybe you incorporate part of the piece. But then when it's time to really get into working on it, save it. Don't let it be your first piece. Begin really practicing, start looking at maybe some of the easiest accompaniments you have, or some of the hymns and that sort of thing. And then, maybe if you're working on pieces that, maybe a trio, for example, you might work on parts separately. That can be a good thing to do. That's always important if you're playing any kind of trio. All right, then this is what I'm saying in number 12, is that you're working out a plan for your practice. One thing that I didn't put in there that I would add, this is something that I encourage all students to do, and I've sort of mentioned it already, something that I call group practice. And group practice means that you're practicing small units or small sections of a piece. I mean, it would be like in the Viva Toccata, playing just, something like that. Or maybe I'm playing Adjutant, but only a small portion of it. Just that much, and stopping. And I feel good about it. And then you go like that. Or it may be that you play from beat 1 to beat 3 of a measure, or you play an entire measure and then you stop, and then you go to the second measure and you do the same thing in the second measure, and then you try playing measures 1 and 2 all together. But this is saying a difficult passage. Maybe, there are a number of places, say in the Bach works, where, you might have a difficult passage that goes over 4 measures, or maybe over 8 measures, and you need to break it up. That's very important to do. I guarantee you, I've seen so many people be able to improve something if they will just do that. They'll take it apart. It's just, okay, I just do 1 measure at a time, and then I start gradually, instead of 1 at a time, I do 2 at a time, and then 3 at a time, and within 10 minutes, maybe you've improved it exponentially. I mean, it's amazing how that can happen. We're almost out of time. If I can just emphasize, above all, that it's about body awareness. That you are constantly monitoring yourself as you play. I mentioned the mirror or having a videotape. That's invaluable, because if you see yourself, then you see what other people are seeing, and you realize, oh my gosh, yeah, I am slumping, or I am raising my shoulders, or whatever. Very helpful to see this, and we can learn from these things. But this constant monitoring, and then thinking, okay, how can I release? How can I release the tension? Another thing we talked about was, as you're standing, you can get just the perfect position for your hand by letting your arms hang freely, and then doing this, just coming up, and then there you are. And that's what you remember. I mentioned what Liszt called it, the la main morte, the dead hand. This, and you have all that freedom when you don't have this tension in the wrist. It really is helpful. And this is the kind of thing that allows you to play more difficult things without building up lots of tension. But at the same time, to play something that's slow-moving and have a good sense of flexibility and freedom to that. Sometimes I find that it's not just the most difficult things that may cause us tension, but sometimes it's the slowest things. You know how in singing, for a choir to sing pianissimo and very legato can almost be the most difficult thing. Sometimes I find that playing extremely legato, I mean with a real overlapping, beautiful legato on the organ, and something that's quite slow, can sometimes be the most difficult thing to really do well. And sometimes that can cause tension for people. So just be aware of that, am I remaining free and loose? Is my wrist still supple? Because I have found this, I see this particularly, let's say if you're introducing someone to the organ, a pianist, who really doesn't know how to play legato. And that's, you can always say to pianists, you'll really learn how to play legato if you learn and study the organ, because pianists, most of them don't really play very legato. You know, they don't have to. You know, they've got the sostegno legato and everything else. And, you know, but as you're working on it, there are certain things that we do on the organ to make something really legato, the thumb glissando, and things like that. They can cause tension for people. So we were just working, and some of you were in there yesterday with Steve Hubbard, and you know, we were working on ways to make something that did not move very fast, but something that required a really good legato. So what can you do to make that easier? You know, and having this supple wrist does it. So